inclusion talks are more open or advanced in comparison with other locations. And being a firm based in São Paulo, which is the largest city of Brazil, we like to say that we live in a cultural bubble, which is, wanting or not, easier to create and maintain certain diversity and inclusion programs and cultural values. So recently we were faced with the opportunity and challenge to promote legal advice for two very large crisis management here in Brazil. And we have from day to night to assemble a whole team to work on these projects in places that we had never worked before. We were not based in these places, which were the cities in the state of Minas Gerais, which is southeast of Brazil, and the state of Alagoas, which is northeast of Brazil. And what we like to share here is our experience on assembling these teams, what were the challenges and difficulties that we faced, or the rewards that we got from assembling these diverse teams, and what we learned there, and we would like to share with you. Just for starters, I would like to make a very brief introduction on the firm and on large numbers in Brazil, just so we are on the same page here. So we all work at Machado Meyer as lawyers. Machado Meyer is one of the largest firms in Brazil. We are in business for more than 48 years now, with more than 800 professionals. And this is very big for Brazil, for a local firm. And we are based at many cities in Brazil, and we have a small office in New York. It is small, but it's there. As many other firms, we have our ERGs. The first one that we created on 2011 was Elas Conectam, which would translate to Connecting Women, was the gender equality program. Then we have the Igualdade, which is equality in English, for LGBTQ plus people. And then ID Afro, which is for racial and ethnic diversity. I like to say that these ERGs already have some offsprings. We are very proud to say that we are the firm in Brazil that has the majority of women in the composition of partnership. We have 40% of our partners being female partners, which is a very large number for Brazil. And we know this is not best number yet, but we are working on that. But in comparison, it is a very good number. We also managed to promote specific pro bono and mentoring activities for LGBT plus people and racial and ethnic diverse people, internally and externally. Externally, speaking about students of universities and public schools, so maybe then can join us in the future of their career. Speaking specifically about Brazil, we have the majority of women in the population. We have also the majority of Black and brown people in the population. And there is an estimate of 20 million LGBTQ plus people in the population. This estimate is said to be not accurate because it was done almost 10 years ago and not in a very official way. It was not part of the official census. So it is said to be a number very higher than that. And just to talk about very briefly about regions in Brazil, I will not go through all the numbers, but I'll make it available here in the file section. If you are interested, please be sure to check it out later. But just to make a brief statement here, it is interesting to see that the northeast regions of Brazil and the southeast regions are the regions in which transphobia, homophobia, and femicide cases are the highest, and coincidentally are the places in which we have to assemble our teams for this crisis management projects, right? So we have here with us myself. I'm a senior attorney in the real estate department. We have Savio, which is also a senior attorney in the litigation department. We have Angelica from the real estate department and Patricia from the litigation department. I will start with the questions. Feel free to ask your questions as you will. I will be following up on them, and we'll have a session later to answer them. And a first question here, I would like to start with Savio to comment on how was this experience for you on leading a diverse, on assembling a diverse team in crisis management and leading this team.
Okay, so hi everyone, I'm Savio. Um, I was in charge of a project that was very important for our firm. We had a client that on January 25th, 2019, suffered the collapse of one of its dams in Brumadinho, releasing a mud flow that advanced through the mine and through the surroundings. It was a tragedy here in Brazil. You might have heard about it or have seen it in the news. There were 270 casualties and different damages to the local population. Our client was ready to start an extrajudicial program to settle and indemnify that population as quickly as possible, given the size of the event. So there were damages, there were pain and suffering damages related to people who lost relatives, mental health issues, of course, loss of properties and loss of jobs. There were some material damages related to loss of properties and loss of their goods, and loss of profits themselves related to the local market, to people who lost jobs because of the event, and people who lost agricultural areas. The client's goal was to indemnify at least 5,000 people during the first year. So they started out by settling with public authorities some indemnification parameters. And then they hired the firm to put together the program. Of course, I usually say that it was like building a plane during the flight because the settlement was already signed and we had to start and carry out the meetings, carry out the settlements all at once. We started out with a team of 12 people. Um, of course, this increased a lot. In the end, we were a little over 50. And currently, we are a little over 50 lawyers in the project in the region of Minas Gerais in the southeast of Brazil. So we had a very clear message from the firm that we were um, supposed to hire a very diverse team. And now, why was that important at the time? Well, first of all, because the firm believes that the diversity enables a richer work atmosphere in which everybody can collaborate actively to the management of the project. Of course, we were talking about a crisis management project, so thinking out of the box was fundamental. And the firm believes that diversity enables that in a more uh, effective way, but also because we were going to be in contact with the local population. Just so you have an idea, in the city of Brumadinho, where the tragedy happened, the population is around 37,000 people, and most of that population was affected in a way or another. Um, and of course, given the size of this portion of the population, the diversity of that population regarding multiracial backgrounds, different socioeconomic backgrounds, different sexual orientations and genders was considerable. So we were worried about having a team that would reflect the same diversity so that we would be able to empathize with that population, because empathy in a program of that nature is the most crucial issue. So it was amazing to start with such a diverse team, um, and it was very important to have been able to receive from the partners of the law firm the green light to conduct our works taking into consideration such diversity, and make an effort that would be very collaborative with different focus groups for different problems that started to arise and are typical in a crisis management scenario, and with everyone's active participation. Um, so it was an incredible experience to be able to do that and to be able to reflect the diversity of the population in our own team so that we could do the best work possible.
Great. So you're talking about the southeast region of Brazil and this specific project. Angelica and Patricia, how was this experience for you in the northeast region? Do you think it was the same? How was it assembling the team, being part of a team in crisis management, being part of the diversity minority, and being leaders for diverse people?
Yeah, for our case, some things were a little bit different. Um, in our case, we didn't have casualties. Um, we just had a geological phenomenon. In March 2018, we had a tremor in Maceió, Alagoas, and that tremor caused some edifications and streets in four neighborhoods in Maceió to crack and start and putting in risk that population of the areas to for the houses to fall apart. So the government authorities asked for the the people of the area to to vacate their houses. And in that area, our client have salt mine extraction mines. So the government authorities and our client made an agreement, and our client started a program to relocate and compensate that the residents of that areas. So the firm was hired for to help them with that program. So we help them with with the legal part of that program. So we look through the documents and everything to help them to reallocate and pay the rightful compensation for the families that are leaving their houses and starting their lives somewhere else. So now we are just starting this work in Maceió, and we have more than 20,000 families and more than 7,000 properties to work with. The the region is the northwest region of Brazil, as you said. It's a very known region to be a very dangerous and with a very poor population. So when we went there, we didn't know what to expect from the team that we were hiring there, from what would be the welcoming that we would have from the residents, how we would be received. So it was very uh, it was a very challenging time for us as lawyers to go to this different place. And for us, uh, me especially, since I'm a black bisexual woman, to go there and not knowing if I was going to be welcomed, since I live in São Paulo, and here everything is very different. It's not perfect, but it's very more acceptable. So it was a little bit challenging, but everything's going very well. But I don't live there, so that's easier for me. But Patricia, that is going to speak next, she lives there, so she has a very local experience to share about the project there in Maceió.
Hi everyone, I'm Patrícia Massman. I'm from Belém do Pará, North Brazil. I'm mastering and PhD in political and economics law. And finally, I'm a 40 years old lesbian and I identify myself as a gender fluid person. So you can use he, she, them as a pronoun, whatever. I was hired as a lawyer by Machado Meyer to work at the Alagoas case in Maceió. At the time, I had moved to Alagoas because my wife's job demands. On this team, I give support to the client leadership, into the financial compensation and support for relocation program, which cover the families impacted by the geological phenomena, which Angelica has told you before. The phenomena had taken place in the districts of Pinheiro, Mutange, Bebedouro, and Bom Parto. These areas are the eldest part of the town, and most of the constructions were residential ones. But there were also a railway line and a stadium of a traditional local soccer team called CSA. And for a local person, I wouldn't ever forget this soccer team, so I can be killed on the street. Well, Maceió is a small and contrasting town. Tourism and hard industry are the main economic activities. I usually say that there are unless two towns in Maceió. One for the tourism, that is prosperous, extremely beautiful and safe. And another one that is hard, full of inequality, traditional, misogynistic, homophobic, and conservative, which has increasing the domestic and homophobic violence against local people. According to the Human Development Index 2015, Alagoas has the country's lowest HDI, mainly because of the poor education of its people. This data is reflected in those areas that were impacted by the geological phenomena, and all those people had to get of their house to keep themselves safe. So we could expect that this project would be completely conservative with mayor leadership and non-heteroperformative, reflecting the local standard. However, the company had not given up of its D&I mission, keeping a black woman as a spokesperson to local community. This affirmative stance has provided guidance to the other stakeholders that are involved in this project, including Machado Meyer. Okay.
Okay, so I have a couple of questions. Angelica, for you, you lead a team of real estate compensation and reallocation in this project. How is it for you being a Black woman, identifying as a bisexual woman, to lead this team, to assemble this team, if you were part of it, and even to bring authority to the team? Was it hard for you? Did you have any hard time on getting respect of the team of locals? Was it easier? Did you have any prejudice on the area that was wrong or right? Would you like to comment on this?
Yeah, when I received the invitation to go to Maceió to lead this team, I didn't know what to expect at first because uh, I would expect to have like um challenges being a black woman because in the northwest region they are not used to have leadership from women, especially black women, because of the culture of the place. They are not used to have female leadership because of the years and years of cultural male leadership there. So I was a little bit frightened if I was going to be accepted there. But in our team, the real estate team, especially of Machado Meyer, we have a very big female leadership. So all of the partners of the real estate team are female partners. We are mostly female in the team, and we have a very big LGBT Q plus a team. So that made me feel more comfortable. So I knew that the partners would not choose people that would make me feel uncomfortable to work with when I went to Maceió. So when I arrived there, I found out that I had a great team to work with and I was very welcomed, and I have a lot of great people to work with. But when I went to some meetings with governmental authorities, or like I had to talk with other people outside the project, I would often like enter the room and I was with a male colleague and they would like only talk to him, and I would like have to introduce myself to the conversation, otherwise they would not talk directly to me. So that would happen sometimes. So I found that a little bit hard in the beginning, but then I would like just do it. Like when I saw it happening, if they would like just talk to him or not talk to me, I would introduce myself to the conversation, and that would be okay for me.
Right. And how was the process of hiring people, especially locals? Did you all? This is a question for everybody. Did you have any specific goal towards hiring diverse people, or was it a very natural thing? Was there any program or politic around it? How was this process for you?
Let me talk a little bit about our experience, Val. At our law firm, we already had and trying to tackle a little bit of the question that Andre Oliveira raised. Um, we already had a very inclusive and comfortable environment for LGBT people. We had our ERG groups, and so LGBT people in our office are already reasonably comfortable. So it wasn't really an issue to find gay lawyers, lesbian lawyers, bisexual lawyers. It is in Brazil difficult to find trans lawyers. That is a problem that we're trying to tackle. Uh, uh, but as for the other orientations, I think it's a little easier. At the time, though, our law firm was not only our law firm, but the nine major law firms in Brazil were facing the issue of changing the racial profile of these law firms in Brazil. Um, these top law firms, they usually have requirements related to colleges and related to a certain fluency in English that end up being a hurdle for a lot of the black and brown population in Brazil. We know that unfortunately this is still related to difficulties in related to the social economic aspect of the issue. And the law firm started realizing together, there are forums to discuss that and alliances among these law firms, realizing that if they maintained these requirements, this profile that was unpleasant for everyone would just keep perpetuating itself. So there was a specific movement in these law firms, including ours, um, aiming at waiving those requirements and focusing more on the capacity of the lawyers, regardless of their background as far as college is concerned, and of course, waiving a certain level of fluency in English so that this level would be built as the lawyers were already in the firm and not before arriving at the firm. So we hired with this focus, and it was amazing for us. We found a lot of multiracial lawyers, and we were able to compose a team, to put together a team that was as diverse as we wanted it to be. And we were able to attend to the population in a more efficient way.
Okay, so you mentioned you have gay people, lesbian people in your team, and in your indemnification program, you deal with people, with locals, with people who suffered losses due to the casualties. Uh, is there any difficulty or any characteristics? For example, is it being more or less effeminate makes it harder for a professional there than it would be in other places? Do you think, or do you think it would be indifferent?
Well, in our case, regarding our team, the fact that I was a gay leader in the project made it possible for everyone that was gay or bi to be comfortable in their own skin. So this was very important in the project. People felt comfortable, and uh, by feeling comfortable, they would be able to contribute a lot to the success of the project. So this is one way to look at it. When we look at the encounters that these lawyers had with the population, uh, I would say it didn't pose a problem. Uh, in fact, it was important at a certain point to have multiracial people and different sexual orientations. We did receive some very interesting feedback from the local authorities we were dealing with regarding the choice of having a multicultural, multiracial, and multigender and multisexual orientation team. And I can mention as an example only something that happened to one of our lawyers. He's a gay lawyer, and he was in a meeting, and during the meeting he was checking the names of the members of the family that were supposed to settle and receive the indemnities, and all of them were supposed to be in the meeting room. And there was the name of a guy, a boy that was the family's son. So the father was there, the mother was there, and the son wasn't present, only the other siblings. And then he said, well, we're looking for your son. Will he be able to come to the meeting and sign the settlement, et cetera, et cetera? And then the father said, well, now it's not anymore a he, it's a she. Natalia is transitioning, and now you can call her Natalia. She wasn't able to make it today, but she will come in our next meeting, and she will present the changes in her documents to show that now she's Natalia. So, of course, the fact that it was a gay lawyer on the other side made it possible to carry out the meeting with total comfort, and it was important for that family to feel that. So the experience was good. We didn't have any hurdles regarding that.
Great to hear that. Do you think there is a prejudice in relation to certain regions in Brazil, uh, and that's why we feel so surprised to hear this kind of stories? I do think it was a very particular situation that happened to to have a great outcome because you had a gay lawyer in the other end of the table.
Yeah, I think Val, just adding up to what I said, I think having a team in which sexual orientation, gender, and race are not issues, not negative issues, they are actually positive. Uh, of course, as I said, it makes everyone very comfortable. And by making everyone very comfortable, I think people are emotionally and psychologically prepared to face the difficulties of carrying out these meetings. I mean, we're talking about families that lost everything. Some of these families lost members of the family. Some of these families lost whole properties. Their life was turned around. So they are usually very hard meetings. I was part of some of these meetings in the beginning of the project to understand how they would be, so that I would be able to lead the team correctly. And it's really good to have a team that's mentally and psychologically and emotionally comfortable, so that they feel supported enough to carry out these meetings.
Great. So while Angelica and Patricia make comment on this question, I would like to add another question that just occurred to me. That is, in relation to mental health, you are dealing with crisis management, you are dealing with casualties, with a lot of stuff that may be hard for a professional to take because we're not trained to do this kind of work in law school. How, besides hiring, assembling these teams, how do you deal with the mental health of your teams in relation to being part of a minority, being part of a crisis management? Do you think it is harder? Do you think there is anything that you do that helps, or that you want to share with us? And that is for everybody, this question.
I think for me, I think like for me especially, what helps is a lot of pressure because you're dealing with a lot of people's life, with people's lives. It's a lot of people lives that you're dealing with. So for me, it's being with my friends, talking with my coworkers about it, and having great leaders in the project that make us feel to share the burden of what is going on, and having time for us to really understand what is going on. I think for us it's a little bit easier. I don't know. I don't know how to explain because of what I said earlier, because we are not really dealing with a project that we had casualties, but it's still we are relocating people from their houses. There are people that lived in this neighborhood for like 30, 40 years, so we hear a lot of sad stories in the daily basis. So it's hard, but I think it helps to have a very diverse team, that we help each other with our daily pressures. And we have this time when we were before the quarantine times, we tried like every day after work to meet up and talk and have dinner together, because we have to leave our houses as well. We're traveling weekly to Maceió. We left our houses to go to Maceió as well. So it gets kind of hard to do that as well. So it's good to have a great team with a lot of diverse people. I have a lot of coworkers that are black coworkers, bisexual girls, lesbian girls, gay guys. So I have people to talk to. So I think that helps.
I
And
think
that is a very
Wagner, can I add something?
right.
Listening to Angelica, I thought I realized that I think the LGBT community, because of our history, we already have the habit of supporting one another, and being there for one another is our motto, I think. So it. By listening to Angelica, I just realized that a lot of our LGBT lawyers in our team, because of this habit that we have of supporting one another, supporting each other, um, we took that in the project as well. We were also working far from our towns. We had to travel every week and go to Minas Gerais. Most of the lawyers were not from Minas Gerais. And this happens, and it's amazing to see it, supporting each other as a characteristic that we carry out because of our history as LGBT people.
Great. So going to a last question before the Q&A part. Is there any remarkable experience, diversity related, on the project or in your career that you would like to share with us?
Paty?
Sorry. Um, well, after so many rejections in job recruiting process because of my sexuality and my gender identification, and after I had lost an important job in a multinational educational company because I refused not being outgoing, I finally found a good place to work. I finally got a inclusive workspace. So despite the local problem and all the stress with the families, I felt more confident to contribute as much as possible to this project because there is no personal stress at all. I could not be more authentic and transparent about who I really am, and it's empowering working in such place where I really can be myself and to do my best for it, and where I can see gays, lesbians, Black women on leadership. And now all the stress of the situation, the local situation, is um, it can be less uncomfortable because I can be myself now.
Great. So Angelica, Savio?
Do you want to go first, Angelica?
Yeah, I can. So for me, an experience that I can say that was very, very remarkable was when I moved. I grew up in the Midwest part of Brazil. So I moved to Brazil when I was older. I was like 27 years old, and I was not very used to live in a big city. Like I lived my whole life in a very small city, and then I moved to the state capital. But anyways, I the state capital was still in the Midwest of the country. So when I moved to São Paulo, I was clueless about how it was to live in a big city. So after a while here, I got my first job in a big firm, and for a year and 4 months or so, I worked in this firm, and I worked very hard. And after all this time, I was fired, and the justification was that I didn't have the corporate profile to work there, and I never quite understood why. I really never understood why. So what made me different from everybody else that worked there was that I was a Black woman that didn't came from a very fancy background, I think. So I don't know, and that made me realize that I was different from people. I always uh, I always had this the only black girl everywhere that I went. So I was the only black girl in school. Was the only black girl in college. I was the only black girl in this office. So that day, it made me click something. And when I went to other interviews and told people what happened, people would look at me and like, oh, yeah, I understand. And I still don't quite understand what happened. So that made me like want to change myself to a profile that I don't think that I need to change, and took me a lot of years to figure that out. So nowadays I found a place that accepts my profile the way that I am, and the way uh, that I need to be, because what I think it matters is what I am professionally, and I think that's a good thing. So that made me realize that, and I think that's a good thing now.
Great. Um,
I think
Great
Patricia's trying to
story.
talk, but
Yeah.
she was on mute. Yeah.
Okay, I'm here now.
Okay.
I would like to share with you my experience with the recruitment process that I took here in this project. Um, because even Machado Meyer had been noticed as a welcome place for LGBTQ plus employees because of its diversity and inclusion initiatives. The Alagoas case has become a real challenge to its recruiting policies. First of all, there are no traditional law schools here, and there is an important gap, English gap. As the focus of the recruiting process was to integrate the local community, Machado Meyer had to face this local reality. Furthermore, other D&I issues had not been focusing on this recruiting process. However, it's important to notice that being a 40 years old lesbian was not a barrier to being hired and outperforming in this project. These facts do not diminish my academic skills to accomplish it. I emphasize my age because my leadership at Machado Meyer is about 10 years old younger than me. So I could have had a generational problem, which also did not happen. I also must say that I was recruited by Machado in late 2019 without any English fluency. And being here with you today is an important step of this commitment with the equality and inclusion. Despite these everyday interactions with co-workers, as Angelica said, uh, matter and show us that our organizational policies become an important achievement to improve the workplace day by day, not even on recruiting process. And as a result, I was just hired by the client to take a leadership position in this project this week. I would like to share this with you. Thank you.
Wonderful, Pachi. My experience, Wagner, that I the most maybe one of the most special ones I've had in the firm was in one of our ERG groups when it was meeting. I think it was one of the events that we put together to talk about diversity in the work environment, in which some junior lawyers they said to us during the event that when they started out at Machado Meyer, they were surprised to see a lawyer like me in a senior position, in a leadership position, but that it inspired them to be comfortable and at ease in their positions as well as junior lawyers and thinking of a career in the firm. And in fact, one of these two lawyers said that he felt comfortable coming out because of that also. So it's a very remarkable experience for me. And when you asked about a remarkable one, this is the one I remember.
Great. Um, Great. I have some questions here from the attendees. One of them, I think, is a very sensitive question. Was how has the presidency affected the LGBTQ plus rights here in Brazil, in our corporate environment, or how is it expected to affect? I think just for context, we have a political issue here currently that sometimes threatens LGBTQ plus rights with comments. We did not have any major events of withdrawal of rights in Brazil, but there are these constant small threats that we see and hear here in Brazil. So if you would like to comment on that.
Every time I think of that, of our difficulties in facing the political scenario in Brazil, which is very much like the one in the United States too, in some other areas of the world, I like to remember what I heard in 2018 in Brazil's Out and Equal. Um, there was somebody speaking that I admire profoundly, which is João Silvério Trevisan. And he was in a panel and he was asked the question, how do we, LGBT community, deal with the political moment we're living now? He said that the LGBT movement, so to speak, is probably the only one in the history of the world in which people are moved by love. Because in the end, we are just going for the right to love the way we are and the way we like to love. And this is a very powerful emotional reason to be fighting for. And the fight for love is the fight that is always going to have a happy ending, in his words, and the construction of a better world for everyone. So I like to remember him when I hear this question, Wagner.
Great. Angelica, Patricia, do you like to comment?
I think we as a movement, we've always faced very difficult times in our country with politics, because in a snap of a finger we could lose all the rights that we have, since we don't have a very strong legislation in Brazil, because everything that we have now are just uh, decisions from our Supreme Court, that if another politician comes, everything can be gone. So I think we as a community need to be together and strong, and really focus in these questions, and really think, who do we want to put there, and really consider these questions, because if we don't, the minimum of rights that we have can be gone very quickly. And I don't think that some members of our community have that concern.
Oh, I agree with Angelica and Savio. I think that this moment is not an exclusive from Brazil. I think that we're living now in a very conservative world. And if you take the numbers, the statistics of violence, homophobic violence or domestic violence in Brazil, we have the same progressive uh, way, and we have to fight all the time and all during all the life, our lives, and even if it's a government from the right or conservative or progressive one, it's not so different. For me, the scenario is just now they are talking what they think. They feel free for this.
Nice. We have another question here that is a very interesting one. That is, how do you see the criminalization of homophobia in Brazil and equiparing it to racism crime? Just for context as well, as many of our LGBTQ plus rights in Brazil, uh, we had a decision, a judicial ruling very recently stating that homophobia is a crime compared to racism. And this raises a lot of questions from a lot of sections of diversity discussion, because some people say that it should not be compared to racism because these are different things. Other people say that this is necessary because it is a way to punish the crimes of homophobia. And before that, we did not have anything specific for homophobia. We have the general crimes that were enough to punish people, but not to aggravate the penalties due to the fact of being motivated by homophobia. So would anyone like to comment on this? This is a very sensitive matter.
I would. Sorry if I'm talking too much, but I love the theme. Leonardo and everyone. I think it was an important step to make it a crime, but making it a crime was not enough. It's easier to punish somebody, and particular, I am all for punitivism. I think our system in Brazil is not a common law system, so we have to write precisely the crimes we believe are crimes. Um, and if we don't, we won't have the proper punishment for that. But I think it's difficult when you face the police authorities. I've heard a lot of stories, and I'm sure Angelica, Patricia, and Patricia and Wagner have also heard a lot of stories of people who go to police stations to report homophobia crimes, and depending on the empathy of the authority that attends to them, it doesn't really help. I personally have heard a story of a gay guy that was a victim of homophobia. He was spanked right after the end of the election in Brazil, and his testimony to us was that when he went to the police station, the police authority that was questioning him was trying to make him the offender and not the victim. So we have a long way to go, but making it a crime for me was a very important step.
Savio, I agree with you, and I think that and this is an issue for feminists also. I think we believe in law as a miracle, but we have to change the culture. We have to change how people think about, and we have to be more. We have to act in this point, not just in law, because law is not a concrete. It's not concrete. It depends the people who will the police who will apply the law. So it's just a beginning. There are a long way. There is a long way to
Yeah, exactly.
achieve the equity.
But we'll keep fighting.
Yes.
Yeah, I think an important remark is that the Brazilian system is very strange because we have a reform system. We don't have a perpetual prison. We don't have any penalties of capital penalties here. So it is a system that is aimed towards replacing, reallocating the person back to society. But we also have this major culture of putting everything under the prison umbrella. So, like Patricia said, making it a crime is not enough. I think it helps a lot uh, to have this right on our side, because it helps when you're being offended. It helps when you're in front of a situation that you're under a homophobia act. It helps to have it as a crime, but it's not enough. You have to have programs to change culture, to change society, to educate and bring together in order to uh, make these crimes disappear and not just to punish them. You know, Angelica, do you like to make any last comments?
No, I think you guys made a
Summary.
great point. Made great point.
Okay, so that was our time for today. We will. I will have our contacts here in a file session if you would like to talk to us, make the conversation, uh, continue with the conversation. I actually lost my words here. We are available. We would love to talk with anybody who wants to talk a little bit more about Brazil. And we thank you very much. Thank you all for participating, for your questions, and for joining us in this experience. Thank you very much.
Thank you all, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you.